Tom, and this is Steven, and we are going to talk about early to mid-stage rapid growth today. So OpenOcean, we're an investor in software companies across Europe. We love data-intensive software, and we met with Steven in 2013.
Yeah.
Early 2014 we invested. The previous year the company had 300,000-400,000 in sales, had a data intensive solution for the advertising industry, and had two founders, Steven and Marco, who had been around the block and done an IPO before and knew what they were doing. That's where they were. This year, they're going to do 55-60 million in revenue, so quite a lot has happened during these 5 years. Let's kick it off with, maybe a timeline, macro level timeline on what's really been going on in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I guess there are a few kind of defining moments. We took our first funding with OpenOcean, also Holspring Ventures investing, and that allowed us to hire quite a large data science team. We'd worked around real-time learning systems before, build out the product, and also build a commercial team in Europe. And then we took the next couple of years to actually find a good product market fit. So we're kind of getting up towards between 5 to 10 million of revenue in fairly rapid session, but quite a lot of test and learn around shaping the proposition. And then we took another relatively small round of funding, another 3 million, and we took a big bet on the US. We put 5 sellers into New York. We didn't want to, I'd done that with a previous company as well. I didn't want to take a risk on 1 or 2 people and have it be an individual that could skew the results.
And by the way, this is one of those classical big questions, right, at that stage. Do you really go for it for real and give yourself a chance, but it will cost you a couple of million? Or do you do it very carefully and then probably you won't succeed?
Yeah, you absolutely have to go for it. In a previous company, we had Touch Clarity as a business we sold in the end. It was also in real-time learning, sold to Adobe, and there we had gone with a small team. They had missed, and then it wasn't until we came back again with a much larger team that we hit, and we'd lost a lot of time, a lot of equity in the meantime. So we kind of had learned that. By the end of that first year, we were already profitable from the US, so the bigger bet paid off, but we were kind of ready and expecting that it might take 2 years and to be patient with a big team. And these weren't just ordinary sellers. We were taking sort of top seller from 3 of the competitors, so we paid appropriately for that. Then after that, we took one more new round, which allowed us to go into Asia, open more offices around the US, and build out our product suite. We're kind of working in the area of advertising attribution, learning what happens after someone sees a video ad especially, and connecting that to something happening in the real world, someone actually walking into a shop and buying something, and measuring the impact of that and optimizing the impact of that and providing analytics. So we started to bring in more and more relevant data sets, bring in survey data, bring in data from also from GPS to measure store visits, and then most recently some really good data from loyalty cards and actual credit card data as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that tech though, because my thesis is that in ad tech, you can kind of throw a platform together pretty easily. If you can sell, you can get a few campaigns going and you get a few 100K in revenue easily. Then to scale that to a real business, not to mention a sustainable business in the face of the headwinds of Google and Facebook and the others out there, it's a very, very different game. So let's go a bit deeper into what has your ML AI technology really eaten?
Yeah, so we had to build connections to pull a lot of data into the system. So we had to store that, and store that not just in a way that was retrievable occasionally, but retrievable in real time. So we could, within 5 milliseconds, make decisions. So we collected data from 4 billion different devices and built
4 billion.
And built user journeys off those. We were able to then have to scale to make 1 million concurrent decisions within 5 milliseconds, and provide then very strong analytics off those, off over 100,000 different individual segments. So that has grown over time to now a development team which is 100 people, and that's not 100 people doing operations and things like that. It's 100 developers with 25 data scientists. And we've built out more and more and more different machine learning code. So we actually have now running around 1,500 different models. And some of those are the latest kind of deep learning algorithms. And we have a system where we can effectively drag in a new piece of code. That code updates and learns itself, and then one Bayesian AI sits across the top and chooses the right bit of code to give the result or the outcome that the advertiser actually wants. So it's a complex, robust system, and it's now all accessible in self-serve mode. So it's super kind of easy and usable to get the result and also to get the analytics and insight out of it.
And there's that meta optimization algorithm, and then there's what, about 100 ML algos under that.
1,500 now, and we do a lot. 1,500, yeah, 1,500.
So I'm on the board of the company, and the last I spoke about this, there were plus 100 algos under the meta one. But
yeah, and there are a lot of the individual data scientists who are very proud of their work, but we're also open to get academic work or pull in corporate machine learning algorithms as well, and just see what does best. We're just there to try and get the best result and be very transparent about what is driving that result.
So going from 300K to 55, 60 in 5 years, building that tech, building a global business with a footprint in a lot of countries. Everything doesn't go like in the movies, right? So what have been the big challenges?
Yeah, apart from my flight last night, which was cancelled coming here,
otherwise it's
life
perfect.
is exactly like that, and there's a number of things that kind of went wrong along the way. I guess one of the first would be the markets that we went into and some of the products we sold. So we're always innovating continually, and I guess I would put this learning under kind of focus. So we're able to very quickly bring all the attention onto the products that were working better, scale back in markets that weren't working as well, and scale up in the markets that are working much, much stronger for us. I think just the whole thing about personnel, they say that 1 in 3 senior members of your management team fail in the early days, and it probably was, maybe were lucky, maybe we got 1 in 4, but we've had some senior people come in to lead the whole US operation, and 3-4 months later you realize they're just not quite doing what they want to do. And that,
but on
shortening the time to making those decisions is challenging.
But I mean, on that I have to say, I have a lot of companies that go from Europe to the US and scale revenues in the US. At least half of the chief revenue officers we hire with the best executive search firms, great advisors, backdoor referencing them, fail. It's really difficult to get it right.
So yeah,
you can't expect to get all the hires perfect.
Focus, sailing scales, and then funding. Funding always takes longer. We always go into it optimistically. It always takes a little bit longer. We've been hugely efficient. As I said, we had 3 million equity, 3 million equity, 5 million equity, and then most recently it was about 8 million equity blended with another 8 of a convertible. So and that's been drawn out over 5 years. So it's been a lot of the time is on the road fundraising. We've been very efficient with that. We've been very close to EBITDA break even the entire time, and we've grown very well off it and built good product. But fundraising shouldn't be underestimated, especially for me. And so having a really strong management team that can support the business, and having a really strong deal team, if you like, to support fundraising has been important as well.
One of the reasons why that has taken a lot of time, of course, is because ad tech, as you know, is slightly out of favor with investors. At the same time, if you think about marketing tech, the CMO nowadays has as large, or actually maybe a slightly larger budget than the CIO in the enterprise. So there's huge money going into this. So maybe that's a good bridge to talk a little bit about the future. What are you doing to get more of that budget, and how are you going to conquer the US and the world?
Yeah. So CMOs are definitely craving for a lot more transparency on what's driving efficiency. They are not really seeing that at the moment. If you look at the market today, it's kind of probably 80% of what's going out, if not more than that, is just measuring standard metrics. So they're measuring things like, did an ad get in front of a person? And maybe they're identifying who that person is. Was it in a brand safe environment? Some basic inputs, if you like. And of course, what they actually want are outcomes. They want someone to go into their store, someone to buy something. And so measurement is now a huge initiative for CMOs. And they care deeply about building that outcome. They care about also understanding the data investments they've made. They've put a huge amount into collecting their own first-party data, paying large amounts to different vendors. They want to know which of those data sets actually drove a return for them. So that's, we're building teams to go directly to the CMO. We're also have self-serve platforms. So in fact, the largest retailers in the world are using our self-serve platforms in several markets, which is pretty interesting given the amount of data they have, that the feedback we get from their clients or from the brand managers and VPs of marketing there is that they don't see that data even from their own systems. So we're putting a lot in place to be able to scale now through software. We're also obviously building out new customers. We currently have over 130 large customers, but a lot of scope to grow there in the US. We've built a global sales team now of nearly 80 people, with half of that in the US. So that is enabling us to grow through adding new logos, deepening the relationships with existing customers, and then scaling through software as well by providing our tools to others. And an exciting new development, we're going to announce some big kind of deals around this very shortly, is giving our software to large publishers, so that's kind of large broadcasters, app owners, so that their huge sales forces can push our products. So that's a really interesting development for the business. And I guess the last piece then is around Asia. We went into Asia 2 years ago, and we're seeing some really interesting metrics there, scaling in a similar way to the US as well. So that a lot of promise there. So,
and I'll throw in one more piece, which is, of course, it's difficult as a European business to build major level trust in the US. So you've now hired an amazing chairman and built a very senior advisory board and so on to be able to turbo boost that effort.
Yeah, piggybacking off the relationships built over years is really useful, and just some of the simple kind of lessons learned and advice as well. So Greg Coleman just joined our board. He previously was president of Criteo, BuzzFeed, and also Huffington Post, and he ran Yahoo's global sales and marketing, building them from 500 billion up to growing up to 5 billion of revenue from 500 million of revenue across 8 years. So he has a very good network and a lot of lessons in startup and also in big company phase. And we pulled in another few advisors from all of the different areas where we can get business, but also where we might get strategic investment, an unfair advantage, and maybe even an exit. So that's kind of how we're thinking about building out
to ensure those CMOs will not only let you in, but let you stay in their rooms as well.
Absolutely. I think that's results are a very good way of catching attention, but ultimately you want to try and build yourself as part of their kind of marketing infrastructure so that they're relying also upon insights, they're feeding data into your systems, and that's where we can win really big, especially now as you start to look towards connected TV and what's happening in that marketplace.
And unfortunately, I feel we've spent more than our 10 minutes, so thank you very much all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.